watching the interaction between my tribe, the Onondaga Nation, being so close to the city of Syracuse, and growing up in the 70s, there were a lot of tensions.
Yeah.
One of my first memories is going to the Nation School to watch Dennis Banks speak. He was kind of on the run at the time, and he was he was staying on the Nation, and none of the law enforcement would go on the reservation and, sort of try to arrest him or serve a search warrant or anything. And I was like, why is that?
Yeah.
That's where I first learned what sovereignty meant up front.
Hey, welcome everyone. So we're doing a little something fun and different today. And we wanted, since we had Yvette 5,000 of our best friends here.
All right.
We wanted to do a live Native Edge podcast for y'all. What do y'all think of that? Awesome. And thank you so much, folks, for downloading that podcast. What do you think of this week, Yvette?
Oh my gosh, it's been amazing. We had record-breaking numbers.
I have seen a lot of famous people here at Res this week. Have you seen some cool people?
I did. I ran into the actor from CSI, and right now I escaped his name. But he came through the art market, and I was in line to do one of my headshots. And he was so nice and stopped by, and we started talking, and he said he was going to go to the trade show, and
wow.
Really engaging everyone.
I wonder if he did some detective work too.
He must have been doing some detective work.
And Martin Sismeyer's here. I don't know if anyone
awesome.
knows. There he is.
There he is. Oh, hey.
You guys know Martin? Yeah, give Martin a hand. He spoke at Res 2020. He's a good friend of mine. I'm looking forward to seeing him. It's great to see him here. Did you go to the fashion show last night? Of course you did.
I did. We were greeting people.
Yeah.
We were high-fiving them.
Did anybody go to the fashion show last night? Oh, 3 people. That's awesome. So I want us to really give a great welcome to our guest and good friend, James Meggesto. Can I hear
James, everybody.
Welcome, James. So James and I have known each other for a good number of years. James, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you work.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's great to be here as always. It really has been a great relationship that I think our firm, Holland and Knight, has had. I'm a partner in the Washington, D.C. office. I'm a member of the Onondaga Nation from upstate New York, one of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy nations. And I've been a practicing attorney in Washington, D.C. for going on 30 years now. I've been working in this space since the late 90s and really enjoyed this relationship that our firm has had with NSED and all the things we've been able to do for our tribal clients.
And James, I like to, Yvette and I like to talk, you sort of get back into even the beginning stages. So tell us a little bit about your journey on becoming a lawyer, because a lot of folks, that listen to the show or maybe in the room, they're on a path. And sometimes you don't know what direction that path's going to go to. So tell us a little bit on that path and how you got to become at Holland and Knight.
So the road started in Syracuse, New York, really. I like I said, I grew up there, and I think lawyer was the 3rd or 4th thing I wanted to be, right after professional baseball player, firefighter, those kind of things. But it was really watching the interaction between my tribe, the Onondaga Nation, being so close to the city of Syracuse. And growing up in the 70s, there were a lot of tensions.
Yeah.
One of my first memories is going to the Nation School to watch Dennis Banks speak. He was kind of on the run at the time, and he was he was staying on the Nation, and none of the law enforcement would go on the reservation and, sort of try to arrest him or serve a search warrant or anything. And I was like, why is that?
Yeah.
That's where I first learned what sovereignty meant, up front. And kind of from there, launched my way as like, how do tribes use this sovereignty to better communities.
That's
Go ahead,
amazing. Yeah. No. Off side note, Chris, I have an easy job. I have Chris James here on stage with me.
Yes. I know that someone doesn't know me when they send me an email and say, hey, dear Chris, dear James, or Jim,
Yeah.
That's
Sorry,
again what we.
James.
Chris
Chris James. Chris and James.
Yes.
Better than
yes.
Chris Jim.
That is so awesome. Jim, thank you. That is awesome that you knew Dennis, or you saw Dennis Banks speak.
Yeah.
Who else has been a motivation in your life?
Well, I have to say my mom, who was one of the first Native American lawyers in the state of New York, one of the first to pass the bar and become a practicing member. So I'm really following in her footsteps. My dad, who's also an attorney, and everybody who's really fought the fights to, make it better for the next generation of people. Even at our firm, I wasn't the first Native lawyer there, but we're trying to expand on what people have done before us to, take our tribal practice to the next level.
Yeah. And so you decided to get your law degree. You became a practicing lawyer, and then did you start working at NCAI? Was that sort of your first Washington experience, or did you have some in between there?
So coming out of college in the early 90s, it was a time when there weren't a lot of jobs,
Yeah.
Especially for somebody who was in upstate New York and wanted to work in tribal law or tribal policy. So I went to Washington and got a job first at the BIA for a half a minute, and then at NCAI. And it was really there that I got to see what was happening in the field of tribal policy. IGRA was only a few years old, and so there were, tribal advocates were fighting to keep that from getting taken away. And I noticed that the people who were really making a difference, or who were able to affect policy, were lawyers.
Yeah.
And knowing that my parents were lawyers, it kind of just drew me into law school.
Right.
So I left NCAI, went to law school,
Okay.
and then came back to DC in '97.
That's pretty amazing because NCAI, and that was, really, it's a great organization that's been around for a very long time, but you were still in a transition period of where our communities were historically, really oppressed in a lot of our communities, but that's when some of the economic development started, right? When you were working sort of in the early days of more money coming into our communities with gaming and things.
Yeah, when I first started, it was a lot of tribes were just kind of wrapping up land claims or Indian Claims Commission cases, really just lawsuits for past damages, which were obviously important to finish up and for tribes to get compensated for the loss of land, water, whatever the case may be. But that next step of proactive economic development was just getting started. And some tribes were very successful early on in gaming, and there were a lot of tribes that didn't have opportunities for one reason or the other. They were, landless or had been terminated and were just getting restored. And so those tribes needed to get a seat at the table too. So it was really exciting to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
Do you find the native to native relationships are getting stronger and that we're actually communicating better with each other as a result of some of conferences such as Res event and other events IGA has, and similarly that you have your different breakout session mid-year conferences? Have you seen that shift and that change of how we're working better together?
Absolutely. I think some of the most fulfilling relationships that I've been a part of when tribes have, expanded their economic development opportunities are tribe to tribe relationships, whether it's a mentorship or, simply, grants and loans, or really a partnership where tribes have seen initial success in a given industry, whether it's gaming or government contracting, 8A programs or the like, and they pass that on to brother and sister tribes.
Yeah.
That's been really exciting to see, and it is growing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why Res set a record this year as opposed to last year, and it'll probably set a record next year, because the only way that the only people that are going to look out for tribes are tribes themselves at the end of the day.
How did you get there?
Right, and tribes have been, great about, giving that advice, helping them avoid mistakes that were made previously. And, when one tribe is successful, another tribe is going to be successful, and that lifts all of us.
Yeah, we all win.
Absolutely.
So left NCAI, went to law school, became a lawyer, started working. Did you go straight to Holland and Knight, or did you have you had some other places to go?
So when I first started out, I did.
To go.
Internship.
We'd like to know where
on
to
the
go.
job.
Yeah, no, it's also interesting that, Holland and Knight's a big firm now. We're top 20 probably worldwide in just terms of lawyer count, and that's not what tribes were really doing in the mid to late 90s. I started out at a boutique law firm in Washington, D.C., because those were really the only few firms that were representing tribes in D.C. and had that opportunity to leverage the federal government, the agencies that were there, and Congress, of course. But from there, as the 90s became the 2000s and gaming really started to expand and tribes were diversifying, it became apparent, even at that boutique firm, that we needed to bring in outside big law firms that had specialized expertise to help tribal clients attain that next level of service, whatever it would be. And so I got recruited to go to a big law firm. I was there for 7 or 8 years, and then Holland and Knight recruited me to head up the tribal practice at Holland and Knight. I've been there for 11 years now and counting.
It's amazing. Even when I was in the federal government, it was great. Holland and Knight would always open their conference room to organizations at times when, you even said, and I'm not kidding about this, James would be like, hey, if you're in DC and you need a place to work, feel free to stop by Holland and Knight. Holland and Knight has this beautiful building right by K Street. I was like, well, they have, it's really awesome to be there, and I really appreciate, because that really solidifies partnerships. And I know you're working with, Yvette and I talk a lot about why those partnerships are important, but also those connections are important. So having that availability to do that, I really appreciate, because it was really nice to, start a friendship with you and the firm. Holland and Knight has been a historic partner and sponsor at the Reservation Economic Summit. So I really thank you for that. Not only support this year, but you're talking since definitely 8 years since we've been here, but even probably before that. So I really appreciate that support.
Well, it's really an easy thing to do, and I appreciate that as well. So many of our clients are here, and our business partners and other folks that do business with our clients, that it makes perfect sense for us to be here. And the work that the organization does to promote Indian country and promote this side of economic development for tribes is really important. There's other tribal organizations, and we're involved there as well, but this sort of, from the ground up entrepreneurial support is key to, next generation level advancement for tribes.
Absolutely.
We had over 200 students, and they had coffee with Chris yesterday, right?
Yeah, coffee with Chris. Did anybody join coffee with Chris?
Did anybody do coffee with Chris? Any of the students?
Yeah, no one came with coffee with Chris. It was really sad. No, it was great. It was great. We had a lot of students.
Over 200 students, right?
Yeah, a lot of students got with coffee with Chris, because we also believe, and we had our 40 under 40 here last year. Let's give shout outs to our 40 under 40. That was,
Yes, that reception was awesome.
Yeah, we have over 600 40 under 40 since 2009 that's gone through that program. Some in your firm. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. Building that and celebrating that next generation, we really are trying to do here at Res 2025 and beyond. And I know, so tell us a little bit about some of your pathways on how you can support the next generation of Native lawyers, or even maybe just policy.
Yeah, what kind of advice would you give them if they're just finished their programs, either bachelor's, master's, and they're thinking about getting into law? What would you tell them?
Well, I would say, I had a great pathway because I didn't go right from undergraduate to law. I actually went to DC and started working. And in the near 30 years I've been there, I have seen lots and lots of super talented Native men and women come to town. Some have stayed, some have gone, but I think the common denominator is that they got an experience that you really can't get anywhere else. Whether they were Udall interns working on Capitol Hill or White House interns or staffers, people have come from their tribal communities and have learned invaluable lessons that they then take back to those communities. And then sometimes they come back to DC. We have a change in administration from time to time, as we've all seen. And
yes.
Whether you're Republican or Democrat or what the case may be, if you were working for one administration for one party and the next party's in, well, it's just a matter of time before that party's back in power. And they're going to look first and foremost to who's been in DC before, who knows how the trains run and how to make them run on time. And so that experience is also super valuable.
Absolutely. So let's talk. Now it's time to get into some of the policy discussions. And I think the crowd really is probably curious on a policy, effort. We know, last year we had, you were on a panel here on main stage with some policy experts talking about some of the challenges even a year ago that we were having with certain programs. You want to expand on some of that, and then we'll sort of follow up with.
Because we're in the now.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Well, even a year ago you were warning. So So talk about that, and then let's get into now.
Sure. Well, everybody knows that it's a certain level of chaos happening in DC now, and it's only starting. It's only just starting, right? It's 55 days into this administration. And the chainsaw that Elon Musk was waving on stage is obviously metaphorical, but it's got some real teeth to it. And they have, top to bottom, doing everything they can to really implement Project 2025. They don't call it that anymore, but right. Everything that you're seeing here, I might have mentioned Project 2025 last year, that said that's going to be their blueprint.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes it particularly important for what's happening now is that, as I said before, whether people that leave DC and come back and have that expertise, well, this particular administration was in DC, saw how they were thwarted by the so-called deep state or whatever. Others would call it checks and balances, but they saw what they couldn't get done the first time, and now they're back determined to get it done this time. And so I think it's a big plate of spaghetti that's been thrown against the wall, and they're going to try to see what sticks. Yeah. And it's up to Indian country to make sure they're not thrown in with that, big mess that they're trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, though, there are there's going to be some policies that we really need to focus on. And some of those, one thing we talked about, of course, is the 8A Business Development Program. We can, I'd rather you give a little bit of what the 8A is. I know a lot of people hear the word 8A, but if you could give like a 10-second even, sort of, this is what the program is, this is sort of why it's important to our communities, and then lastly, this is why we really need to protect that program.
Absolutely. The 8A program has been invaluable to tribes, top to bottom, for the obvious advantage that it provides to startups, Native communities, et cetera. And the thing that absolutely 100% has to be pounded into this administration is that it is not a DEI program.
Right. Correct. Yes.
It is 100. It is the United States has trust and treaty obligations to every single tribe in this country.
Yes.
And the 8A program is a perfect example of why the government has these programs, because they're not DEI. They are, our ancestors bled for those programs.
Right.
Treaties, broken treaties, a history of dealing with tribes has led to those programs being necessary and truly important to make sure tribes get the benefit of those bargains of those treaties and all those land cessions, everything that has happened over the course of 200 plus years
Yeah.
are embodied in those programs going forward. And I think the tribes have done a good job in these first 50 days of explaining that to the
Yes,
administration.
supreme law of the land.
Absolutely.
And both of our yesterday we had a conversation with Department of Energy. It was our only one Trump administration appointee that was here, and he was really good at really explaining that we are separate from everyone else. And I think we do have some advocates in Washington. What is some of your advice? Because I know people in this room, a lot of times they're talking with their organizations, and they're talking with their tribe, and they're talking with other people that may be going to Washington. So what do you think how should we better communicate with those officials, and even Congress is, sort of telling our story? What's some of your advice on that?
Well, I think some of the most effective advocacy starts at the grassroots level. Every tribe has a local congressperson that they hopefully have a good relationship with. And from there, regardless of the party, because these are slim majorities, this administration is acting like they've got a 49 state mandate, but it was a close election and Congress is closely divided. They need votes for most things to cross over party to party. And so even if their member happens to be in the minority right now, they're still critically important to telling that message. And then, of course, staying politically active. All the national organizations have done a great job, in my opinion, of coming together, issuing joint letters, educating this administration and the relevant committees of how important the work is and what they're doing for the nation and for their tribal communities. And so telling stories to their members, to their advocates, what's happening on the ground in my tribal community? How are we impacted by this particular cut or this rescission or this contract getting canceled? How does it affect our jobs? How does it affect our local economy? Because it's going to have multiplying effects down the road that are not intended.
Yeah, absolutely. And Yvette, you work, with the programs that you oversee. I mean, you're working with a lot of federal folks and having those conversations. How are you communicating with them? Because, they're a little nervous. They're thinking, oh, am I going to have a job?
Yes, the conversations have really changed, actually. I think they're very afraid. They're human, so they want to think about, do I have a job next week, and what does that look like? And I really feel for them. I really do, because we want nothing more than to work with all of the federal agencies and build strong relationships and have that trust responsibility that needs to be implemented, because that's the supreme law of the land. And they are really afraid, but yet they really want to work with us and want to work with our communities, at least the ones that I've personally have worked with. So the conversations have been easier in a lot of ways. And we've streamlined some things, so that's been very positive. So we can only wait to see what happens in the next few days and weeks and months ahead.
Yeah. One thing we've tried to make clear to a lot of our tribal clients, especially some of these lease terminations, the BIA and IHS office closures, is most of the tribes that we represent or deal with are self-governance, or tribes that are experienced in 638, and is the contracts. Look at those look what these whether these closures have created an opportunity to expand tribal self-governing. Since if the BIA or the IHS isn't going to fulfill their responsibility in that respect, tribes are going to have to step up, and maybe they can save some of those jobs.
Well, and even with the National Park Service, I know how important that is to a lot of our communities, including my own in Cherokee, North Carolina, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. We border the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So when there's issues with closures, that's one of the two only gateways into our community, 2 out of 3, or 1 out of 3. So, that's really impactful when there's not enough people to work at those parks. It affects our It can affect one of the entryways into our community. It could also affect tourism in our community. It's a big deal.
Well, even the fires in California.
Yeah.
And look who came in from Mexico to help us out. I mean, honestly, and a lot of our native communities were involved in sending teams to California to help out. So, I mean, we're all interconnected anyway. So we all have to work together, state, city, federal,
And
county, tribal, of course, tribal to tribal nations.
So if, let's say that you have someone that you feel like you need to advocate for that maybe works for the, or help protect that position or office, what is some of your suggestions? You had mentioned that we definitely have that conversation with our congressional folks. Do you foresee another gateway of offices, or maybe someone else that, say, hey, I really like working with this office. I'm scared that it's going to disappear. Who should we reach out to?
Right. Well, so at Interior, obviously, we're waiting for the confirmation of the Assistant Secretary nominee, Billy Kirkland, member of the Navajo Nation. I think he's going to be really good. He's had experience in D.C. in the first Trump administration on the more on the White House side. But obviously Interior and BIA, but IHS, RFK Jr., regardless of some of the more out there things he said, made sure to revoke the elimination of IHS related jobs on that first day.
Yeah.
And so who in those various cabinet levels at Treasury, the Deputy Secretary nominee was very supportive of the tribal office and the work that they do. So each cabinet level secretary is going to have somebody that they're going to look towards on tribal issues. And we got to make sure we have a clear pipeline of communication to those people, because they're going to want to help. They're going to understand at that granular level how important the trust relationship is, and that government to government relationship is going to be, and how it's not, part of what this administration is trying to cut back and eliminate, because that's not going to be good for anybody.
Well, James, I can't believe how quickly this conversation has gone time-wise. So as we're sort of wrapping up here.
2 minutes, Chris.
Do I have 2 minutes?
Chris,
oh, wow, 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Not James.
So as we're wrapping this up, Yvette and I talk a lot about work-life balance. And you and I have full disclosure, James has given me some great advice on some work-life balance issues, especially as my children are
And you had a shout out the other day.
Yeah, I like having shout outs.
Like, we love you, Chris. Lost weight. I'm like, wow.
But work-life balance, yes, exercise is so important, but even with transition of my kids are now going, I had one in college, I have two more on the way. James gave me some great advice on that. But just I know you have a pretty intense job. I mean, no one can say that, what you do, the advocacy work, working in, one of the world's largest law firm. What is some of the things you do for work-life balance, and how do you keep grounded, not only maybe in culture, but also just grounded in just mental clarity?
No, it's a great question. I mean, as you said, being a parent, we do this for our kids, regardless of whether we have our own natural born kids or the children in our communities. That's who we're doing this for the next generation. And as Odin has shown, we're doing it for the 7 generations after us. But to keep that balance, you have to figure out what it is that you're good at and how it complements the work we do. I like to work with my hands, whether it's being handy around the house or playing golf or whatever, because I think you need those quick wins, those quick areas of satisfaction, because the work we do for tribes, cases I've been involved in, I helped the tribe, some of whom are here today, and that was 14 years of work from the first engagement to when we got them where they needed to be. And so if you're working in an area where it's going to take time to get your wins, then I think you've got to balance that with things that are going to give you a little bit more instant gratification. And I find sports and stuff as a way to do that.
Awesome. Well, my friend, thank you so much for joining. This is the first ever live Native Edge podcast we've ever done. I really appreciate it. Yvette, any closing words for us today?
No, I like what you said. It's the turtle that wins the race,
right.
not
That's
the,
right.
the rabbit that's running ahead and taking a nap.
That's right. Probably because I'm Turtle Clan.
There you
Look at that.
go.
That's right. There it is.
There you go. That's awesome. Here, give me a high five. That's great.
So to the audience, thank you so much for letting you guys be part of the Native Edge podcast. Thank you so much for your support of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise. What's our name, Yvette?
Native Edge podcast.
Native Edge
We're the
Podcast.
National Center
National
for
Center
American
for
Indian
Amer-
Enterprise Development.
That's it. That's fun to say.
But
That's
check
the
it out.
longest name
I know.
of organization.
Like,
The National
well,
Center
the
for
board
American
members
Indian
down
Enterprise
here,
Development.
what were they thinking? Derek's like, I know.
I know.
That.
So I always close the Native Edge podcast by saying, see you next time on the Native Edge.